Commander Cole had spent 3 years preparing for this mission. Every other soldier in the United Earth Fleet had refused it. They called it suicide. They called it madness, but understood what was at stake. The Empire was expanding toward human space, and nobody knew their weaknesses. Somebody had to find out. They were not like any species humanity had encountered before. They were ancient, they were powerful, and they fed on the life force of other beings. Across 12 star systems, countless species lived under their rule, offering tribute in the form of their own people. They drained them slowly, keeping them alive just enough to feed again later. It was farming, but with souls instead of crops. Had disguised himself as a servant from one of the conquered worlds. His skin had been altered to match the gray-blue color of the people. His eyes had been modified to appear larger and darker. False documents identified him as a tribute bearer from a minor colony. He was one face among thousands at the annual gathering where conquered species came to offer their gifts to the Empire. The gathering took place on Prime, the throne world of the planet was beautiful in a terrible way. Its cities were built from black stone that seemed to drink in the light. Rivers of some glowing red substance flowed through the streets like veins carrying blood. Everything was designed to remind visitors that they were in the heart of a predator's domain. Kept his head down as he moved through the crowds. Around him, representatives from dozens of species shuffled forward in lines. Some wept quietly. Others had the empty eyes of those who had accepted their fate long ago. Guards in dark armor watched from elevated platforms, their pale faces showing no emotion. The main hall was larger than any building had ever entered. Its ceiling disappeared into darkness far above. Massive pillars carved with scenes of conquest lined the walls. At the far end, a throne of black crystal sat empty, waiting. Then the air changed. Felt it before he saw anything, a pressure in his chest, a coldness that crept into his bones. The beings around him fell to their knees, pressing their faces to the floor. He dropped with them, not wanting to stand out. A ship descended through an opening in the ceiling. It was small compared to the hall, but it radiated power. Its surface was smooth and black, reflecting nothing. When it touched down, a ramp extended and she emerged. Empress Val was 3,000 years old, had studied every piece of information humanity had gathered about her, but nothing had prepared him for the reality. She was tall and slender, her skin pale as moonlight. Her hair was long and black, flowing behind her like a living shadow. Her eyes were the color of fresh blood, and they swept across the hall with the casual attention of someone examining insects. She wore robes that seemed to be made of darkness itself. When she moved, they rippled like water. Rings of strange metal adorned her fingers, and a thin crown of silver sat upon her head. She was beautiful in the way a weapon is beautiful, perfect and deadly. The Empress walked down the ramp and began moving through the lines of tribute bearers. She stopped occasionally, reaching out to touch a face or lift a chin. When she fed, it was quick. Her hand would rest on a victim's forehead and their body would shudder. The color would drain from their skin. Their eyes would go dull. When she removed her hand, they would collapse, empty husks that guards dragged away. Controlled his breathing. He counted his heartbeats. He focused on the mission. Gather information, find weaknesses, get out alive. The Empress drew closer. She passed the row in front of his, kept his eyes fixed on the floor, watching her feet from the corner of his vision. Black boots that made no sound on the stone floor. She moved like smoke, like shadow, like death itself. She stopped directly in front of him. His heart hammered against his ribs. Had his disguise failed? Had someone reported him? He prepared himself for the end, hoping only that his death would be quick. "Look at me." Her voice was unlike anything he had expected. It was soft, almost musical, but it carried through the entire hall. It was a voice that had commanded armies and sentenced worlds to death. It was a voice that expected absolute obedience. Raised his eyes. The Empress's face changed. For a single moment, her mask of cold indifference shattered. Her red eyes went wide. Her lips parted slightly. Something that looked almost like fear flickered across her ancient features. Every guard in the hall tensed. Weapons were raised. The air grew even colder. The Empress grabbed his chin with fingers that felt like ice. She turned his face left, then right, studying him the way a scientist might study a specimen that had suddenly become dangerous. Her red eyes searched his face with an intensity that felt like it might burn through his skull. "I know you, human," she whispered. The word hit like a physical blow. Human. She had seen through his disguise instantly, but there was something else in her voice, something that sounded almost like recognition, almost like dread. "I have seen your face in the dreaming dark," she continued, her voice barely audible, "in the prophecy that my kind has spent 10,000 years trying to prevent." Did not understand her words. He did not know what the dreaming dark was or what prophecy she meant, but he understood one thing clearly. Whatever she saw when she looked at him, it frightened her, and nothing should have been able to frighten the most powerful being in 12-star systems. The Empress released his chin and stepped back. Her composure returned, but it seemed forced now. She turned to her guards and spoke with cold authority. "Take him to my private chambers. Tell no one. If word of this spreads, I will personally drain every guard in this room." Strong hands grabbed his arms. He did not resist as they dragged him away. His mind raced with questions. What prophecy? How did she know he was human? What did she see when she looked at him? As he was pulled through a side passage, he heard the Empress give one final command to her court. Her voice echoed through the great hall, carrying words that would change the course of galactic history. "Cancel the expansion into human space. Immediately, all of it." Silence fell over the hall. The Empire had been advancing toward human colonies for decades. Preparations for invasion had been for years. And now, with a single glance at one human face, the Empress had ordered it all to stop. The guards dragged through dark corridors, and he realized that his mission had just become something far more complicated than gathering intelligence. He had walked into the heart of the enemy empire looking for weaknesses. Instead, he had discovered that the Empire was afraid of him. The guards threw into a room that was larger than most homes on Earth. The walls were covered with strange objects. Ancient weapons hung next to paintings of worlds he did not recognize. Shelves held artifacts made of materials he could not name. Star maps covered one entire wall, showing the galaxy in incredible detail. Certain sections were marked in pulsing red, warning zones, forbidden territories. Looked closer and felt his breath catch in his throat. The red zones matched human-controlled space almost exactly. The door opened behind him. The Empress entered alone, without guards. She moved to a table in the center of the room and poured herself a glass of something dark and thick. She did not offer him any. "Your disguise was well crafted," she said. "It would have fooled any of my servants, any of my guards. It did not fool me." "How did you know?" She turned to face him. "Because I have been watching for your kind for 3,000 years. The do not see as other species see. We sense the life force within all things. And humans," she paused, her red eyes studying him. "Humans burn differently than any other species in the galaxy." Stood in the center of the room, acutely aware that he was unarmed and alone with a being who could kill him with a touch. But she had not killed him yet. She had ordered him brought here privately. She wanted something from him. "What did you mean," he asked, "when you said you knew me, when you mentioned a prophecy?" The Empress set down her glass. She walked to the star map and touched a control. The display changed, showing not the current galaxy but something far older. Ships of impossible design, cities that stretched across entire planets, and at the center of it all, beings of light and strange geometry that hurt to look at. "Your species was supposed to be extinct," she said. "The precursors seeded your world with genetic markers we recognize, markers of the Devourers." "The Devourers." She turned to face him fully. In her eyes, he saw something he never expected to see in the ruler of a galaxy-spanning empire. He saw old fear, ancient trauma that had never fully healed. 10,000 years ago, the empire was young. We were spreading across the stars, feeding on lesser species, building our power. We believed ourselves invincible. Her voice grew quiet. We were wrong. The display changed again. Now it showed war. Ships by the thousands, facing enemies that seemed to be made of pure energy. They attacked with everything they had. It did not matter. The energy beings tore through their fleets like they were made of paper. Planets died in seconds. Entire populations were drained not over years but in moments. The Devourers, the Empress said, were what we could become if we evolved for another 1,000,000 years. They had moved beyond physical form. They fed on life force as we do, but they had no limits. A single devourer could drain a world. A fleet of them could end a civilization. Watched the ancient recording. He saw the lose battle after battle. He saw their empire shrink to a fraction of its size. He saw desperation and terror in species that had once believed themselves the supreme predators of the galaxy. How did you survive? We did not defeat them. The Empress's voice was barely a whisper. They simply vanished. They transcended to some higher dimension we cannot reach. They left without explanation, without warning. One day they were destroying everything we had built. The next day they were gone. She turned off the display. The room returned to normal lighting, but the weight of what had seen hung in the air between them. But they left something behind, she continued. A warning, a prophecy carved into the ruins of their last known location. It spoke of a species that would arise carrying their genetic legacy. A species that would either complete the Devourer's work and end all life in the galaxy, or save the galaxy from the Devourer's inevitable return. Felt cold despite the room's warmth, and you think humans are that species. I do not think I know. The Empress moved closer to him. I have walked the dreaming dark for 3,000 years. The dreaming dark is the collective unconscious of the people. It shows us visions of possible futures, and I have seen your face, Commander Cole, in 1,000 of those visions. How do you know my name? Because in some visions you tell me. In some you scream it as you die. In others I whisper it as I die. Her red eyes held his gaze without blinking. Sometimes you stand beside me as the galaxy burns. Sometimes you stand against me as I burn instead. The prophecy hinges on a choice, your choice, and I cannot see which path you will take. His mind raced with the implications. They had not avoided human space by accident. They had stayed away out of fear. Fear of an ancient prophecy. Fear of what humans might become. What do you want from me? The Empress walked to a window that looked out over her throne world. The city spread below them like a web of darkness and red light. Millions of beings lived in those streets, all of them serving the empire she had ruled for 3. I want to understand what you are, she said. I want to know if the Devourer's legacy can be controlled, perhaps even allied with. She turned back to face him, and her expression shifted. Vulnerability flickered beneath the mask of ancient power. Because the dreaming dark has shown me something else, Commander, something that terrifies me more than any prophecy. She touched the star map again. This time it showed the galaxy's edge. A darkness was spreading there, not the darkness of empty space, but something active, something hungry. The Devourers are not gone, she said. They are returning. The dimension they escaped to is collapsing. They have no choice but to come back. And when they arrive, even my empire will be dust before them. Every world, every species, everything that lives will be consumed. The darkness on the map pulsed. It was closer than had expected, closer than he was comfortable with. When, he asked. Months, perhaps a year at most. The Empress extended her hand. It was an offer. It was a plea. It was a desperate gamble from someone who had run out of other options. Help me understand your kind, she said. Work with me. Let us discover together what humanity truly is. Perhaps we can survive what is coming. Perhaps we can even stop it." Her red eyes met his with complete seriousness. "Refuse, and I will have no choice but to destroy humanity before your potential awakens. I cannot allow the devourers to return and find their heirs waiting for them." Looked at her extended hand. He thought about everything he had learned. Humanity was not just another species the wanted to conquer. Humanity was a weapon, a sleeping weapon planted by beings so powerful they had nearly ended the empire at its peak. And now he was being asked to help the enemy understand that weapon, to trust the creature who had just threatened to destroy his entire species. But the alternative was worse. If the devourers were truly returning, humanity could not face them alone. Nobody could face them alone. The recordings he had seen proved that. Reached out and took the Empress's cold hand. "I will help you understand us," he said, "but I want full access to everything you know about the devourers, everything you know about this prophecy. No secrets." The Empress's fingers closed around his. For the first time, something like hope flickered in her ancient red eyes. "No secrets," she agreed. "We will learn the truth together, whatever that truth may be." Neither of them knew yet how much that truth would change them both. The tests began immediately, was taken to a research facility hidden deep beneath the throne world's surface. The scientists there were pale and ancient, their red eyes studying him like he was the most fascinating puzzle they had ever encountered. The Empress supervised everything personally. She trusted no one else with knowledge this dangerous. They took his blood. They scanned his body with machines he did not understand. They asked him thousands of questions about human history, human biology, human psychology, answered honestly. He had made a deal and he intended to keep it. What surprised him was how much they shared in return. They were not the monsters human propaganda described. Their empire was brutal, yes. They fed on other species to survive, but they had also preserved countless dying civilizations. They maintained ecological balance across hundreds of worlds. They created art so beautiful that found himself moved to tears when he saw it. They were predators, but predators who understood that killing everything meant starving themselves. "We learned long ago," explained during one of their many conversations, "that sustainable feeding means caring for those we feed upon. A good shepherd does not slaughter the entire flock." That is a disturbing way to describe it. Perhaps, but it is honest. Would you prefer comfortable lies? Found that he would not. The honesty between them grew with each passing day. She told him about the loneliness of ruling for 3,000 years. He told her about growing up on a colony world, watching the stars and wondering what waited out there. She described the weight of an empire that depended on her strength. He described the weight of being the only human in enemy territory, carrying the hopes of his species. They were enemies who were becoming something else, something neither had a name for. 3 weeks into the research, the scientists made a discovery that changed everything. "We need to test something," the lead researcher said. His name was, and he was one of the oldest had ever seen. "We need to observe what happens when it attempts to feed on you." Felt his stomach tighten. "You want to drain me." "Under controlled conditions. We will stop before any permanent harm is done. The Empress has guaranteed your safety." Looked at, she stood in the corner of the laboratory, watching with an unreadable expression. "I give you my word," she said, "no harm will come to you." He trusted her. He did not fully understand why, but he trusted her. "Do it." A young soldier stepped forward. He was nervous. Feeding on a human was uncharted territory for his kind. He placed his hand on his forehead and began the draining process. Pain flared through his skull. He felt something being pulled out of him, some essential part of himself being drawn toward this cold touch. Then something unexpected happened. The flow reversed. Energy rushed into instead of out of him. The soldier cried out in shock and tried to pull away, but the connection held. Golden light flickered behind his eyes. For a brief moment, he saw the laboratory not as a human would see it, but as a wood. He sensed the life force of everyone in the room. He felt their essence like warmth against his skin. The connection broke. The soldier stumbled backward, gasping, blinked, and his vision returned to normal. Impossible, breathed, staring at his instruments. His cells absorbed the essence transfer. They converted it into something else. Moved forward, her eyes fixed on with an intensity he had never seen before. The devourers did not just consume life force. They evolved to transform it, to weaponize it. She turned to the readings. Your ancestors were engineered to be the ultimate predators of predators. Looked at his hands. They seemed the same as always, but something had awakened inside him, something that had been sleeping for millions of years. This is why you avoided Earth, he realized. You sensed the potential. Our scouts who approached your world never returned. We assumed you had defenses, technology. We never imagined the truth. His voice was quiet. That proximity alone was dangerous to us. The tests continued with new urgency. The scientists discovered that human blood contained dormant proteins that reacted to essence draining in unprecedented ways. When activated, these proteins did not just block the draining process. They reversed it. They could potentially absorb and redirect any essence-based attack. But there was another discovery, one that found most significant of all. Human blood, when willingly given, could strengthen without the usual cost. The essence transfer became symbiotic rather than parasitic. For the first time in recorded history, it could feed without killing, without even harming the donor. They tested this with permission. Herself conducted the experiment. She took his offered wrist and drank and watched her face transform. The cold hunger that always lurked behind her eyes faded. In its place came something like peace, something like satisfaction without guilt. When she finished, she released his wrist and stepped back. Her hands were shaking. "What did it feel like?" asked. She did not answer for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion she had not experienced in centuries. Like being warm for the first time in 3,000 years. Felt the change too. He was tired but not drained. Something had been shared between them, something deeper than blood or essence. A connection had formed that he did not fully understand. The research continued for another month. Learned more about his awakening abilities. He practiced sensing life force around him. He learned to consciously draw on the dormant power in his cells. It was not easy. It felt like trying to move muscles that had atrophied over millions of years, but progress came steadily. Then the first Devourer scout arrived at the galaxy's edge. The dreaming dark screamed. Was in the laboratory when it happened. Every in the building collapsed simultaneously, clutching their heads and crying out in psychic agony. Alarms blared. Emergency lights flashed red. He found on the floor of her private chambers, curled into a fetal position, her eyes wide with terror. "They are here," she gasped. "The scouts, they have found us." Knelt beside her. Golden light flickered in his eyes as his abilities activated in response to her distress. He reached out and took her hand, and somehow, impossibly, his touch seemed to ease her pain. She looked up at him with red eyes full of ancient fear. "The main fleet will follow," she whispered. "Months, we have months at most." Helped her to her feet. She leaned against him, still weak from the psychic assault. He did not let go. "Then we have work to do," he said. "Humanity needs to know what is coming. They need to be prepared." Straightened. The mask of the Empress returned, but underneath it, something had changed. She looked at not as a subject or a specimen or even an ally. She looked at him as a partner. "We will go together," she said. "I will accompany you to Earth. I will tell your people what I know. I will beg for their help if I must." The Empress does not beg. A small smile touched her lips. It looked strange on her ancient face, like she had forgotten how to make the expression. "For the first time in 3,000 years," she said, "I have something worth begging for." They began preparing for the journey that would change everything. The Devourer scout had been destroyed by a combined fleet, but not before it sent a signal toward the dark edge of the galaxy. The message was clear. The main fleet would follow. Based on the Dreaming Dark's calculations, they would arrive in 3 months. 3 months before enough power arrived to drain the life from every inhabited world. Humanity had to be warned. Return to Earth aboard a ship unlike any human had seen before. It was a diplomatic vessel, stripped of all weapons as a gesture of trust. The Empress herself traveled with him. She brought only a small honor guard, leaving the bulk of her forces behind to prepare for the coming invasion. The sight of a delegation requesting alliance instead of demanding tribute sent shockwaves through human space. For decades, humanity had prepared for war with the Empire. Now the Empire's ruler was arriving peacefully, asking for help. The United Earth Council convened an emergency session in the capital city of New Geneva. Representatives from every human colony gathered to hear what they had to say. Armed soldiers lined the walls, their weapons trained on the pale figures who had terrorized humanity's nightmares for generations. Stood beside as she addressed the council. He had changed in the months since leaving Earth. There was a stillness in him now, a patience that came from spending time among beings who measured their lives in rather than decades. Admiral led the questioning. She was a veteran of 3 campaigns against raiders, and her hatred for them was written clearly on her face. "You expect us to believe this," she demanded. "You expect us to believe that we are descended from galaxy-destroying predators, that an even greater threat is coming. This sounds like a trick, a way to make us lower our defenses." Stood calmly before the hostile crowd. She had faced worse in her long existence. "I expect nothing," she replied. "I am offering information and requesting cooperation. The evidence is available for your scientists to examine. Your people are welcome to study everything we have learned about human biology and the Devourer threat. And if we refuse, then the Devourers will arrive in 3 months, and you will face them alone, as will we, and both our species will be destroyed because we were too proud to stand together." The council chamber erupted in arguments. Representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded immediate rejection of the alliance. Others called for caution and further investigation. The noise grew until stepped forward. "Let me show them," he said quietly too. She nodded. Walked to the center of the chamber. The shouting faded as people noticed him moving. He approached one of the guards who had accompanied the Empress. The guard tensed, uncertain what was happening. "Do not resist," commanded. "Let him demonstrate." Placed his hand on the guard's shoulder. He reached inside himself for the power that had awakened in the laboratories. He found it and pushed. Golden light erupted from his palm. The guard gasped, but not in pain. Energy flowed through, transformed by his cells, and returned to the in a purified form. The guard's eyes went wide. His posture straightened. When removed his hand, the alien looked stronger than before. "The stories are true," the guard whispered. "The humans are the children of the Devourers." Silence gripped the council chamber. Every human present had just witnessed something impossible. One of their own had touched and made it stronger instead of being drained. Admiral's expression shifted from hostility to concern. "What are you?" she asked. "I am human," he replied. "We all are, and we are carrying something inside us that has been sleeping for millions of years. The precursors planted genetic code in our ancestors, code designed to counter essence-draining species. We are not prey. We never were. We are the predator's predators." The demonstration changed the council's stance. Skepticism gave way to urgent concern. If humans truly carried this potential, and the Devourers were returning to claim or destroy that potential, then the entire species was in danger. But a new problem emerged. "How do we awaken this ability in everyone?" asked Representative Torres. "You have had months of training with scientists. We have billions of people and only 3 months. The question hung in the air, looked at. They had discussed this on the journey to Earth. They had not found an easy answer. It was a younger sister who proposed a solution. Dr. Cole was a geneticist who had been brought in to analyze the data. She was brilliant and practical, and she had spent the past week studying everything the had shared about human biology. The abilities activate in response to essence-draining exposure, she explained, pulling up diagrams on the main display. We cannot safely expose billions of people to feeding. The risk of death would be too high, but we might be able to create a synthetic trigger, a gene therapy that mimics the activation without the risk. How long would that take? Admiral asked. To develop, test, and distribute to billions of people, 6 months minimum, probably longer. The fleet would arrive in 3. The chamber fell silent again. The numbers did not work. There was not enough time. Spoke into the silence. There may be another way. All eyes turned to her. She moved to the center of the chamber, her dark robes flowing around her like shadows. The dreaming dark connects all across space. It is our collective unconscious, our shared psychic network. If a strong enough bond could be established between humans, and the activation might cascade naturally. Human awakening could spread through the connection like fire spreading through dry grass. What kind of bond? Asked. The Empress hesitated. This was the part she had not wanted to explain. This was the part that showed weakness. The deepest bond, the one we abandoned ago because it made us vulnerable. She lifted her chin, ancient pride warring with desperate necessity. Symbiotic bonding, not feeding but sharing. Complete mutual trust between our species. The implications settled over the room. For generations, humans had been enemies, predator and prey. Now they were being asked to share their very life essence, to open themselves completely to beings they had every reason to fear. Admiral shook her head. You are asking us to trust you, after everything your empire has done, after the colonies you have raided, the people you have taken. I am asking you to trust us enough to survive, replied. The alternative is extinction, for both our kinds. The argument continued for hours. Representatives debated, scientists analyzed, military leaders calculated odds and resources. But as the discussion stretched on, one question remained unanswered. Who would be willing to take the first step? Who would trust the enemy enough to share something so intimate? Stood and spoke clearly. I will go first. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. His sister's face showed fear. Admiral's showed surprise, showed something he could not quite identify. I have lived among them for months, continued. I have worked beside them. I have learned their ways, and I have seen something that most humans have not had the chance to see. They are not monsters. They are different from us, yes. They survive in ways we find disturbing, but they are capable of honor, of loyalty, of trust. He looked at, something passed between them that words could not capture. If someone must take the first step, let it be me. I have the most experience with my abilities. I have the strongest connection to the already, and I am willing to risk everything for the chance to save both our peoples. The chamber was silent. Then slowly, other voices joined his. Scientists who had studied the data, soldiers who understood the stakes, ordinary people who refused to let fear control their choices. By the end of the session, a plan had formed. Volunteer pairs would undergo the bonding ceremony. Humans would share essence in the deepest way possible. If it worked, the cascade effect would spread through both species. If it failed, they would find another way. But someone had to go first. And looked at each other across the council chamber. They both knew that this moment had been building since their first meeting, since she grabbed his chin and saw prophecy in his face. Neither looked away. The bonding ceremony took place on a neutral station between human and space. It was broadcast across both civilizations. Billions watched from colonies and throne worlds alike. They watched because they needed hope. They watched because they needed to believe that enemies could become allies when survival demanded it, and stood at the center of the ceremony chamber. Around them, volunteer pairs waited in concentric circles, humans and who had chosen to bridge the gap between their species. They were soldiers and scientists, diplomats and ordinary citizens. They were afraid, but they were there. Looked at the woman beside him, the Empress who had threatened to destroy his species, the ancient being who had shared her deepest fears with him, the partner he had never expected to find. "If this fails," he murmured, "we have just given them a propaganda victory. We have proven that trust between our peoples is impossible." "Then we must not fail." His cold hand found his. "I have lived 3,000 years. I have conquered worlds and drained kings and watched civilizations rise and fall, and I have never been more terrified than I am in this moment." "Why?" Her red eyes met his. "Because I have never had something I was truly afraid to lose." The ceremony began. Ancient words were spoken. Rituals merged with human traditions to create something new, something that had never existed before. Then came the moment of truth. Offered his essence willingly, offered hers in return. They did not take from each other, they gave, freely and completely. Energy flowed between them. Felts of memories washed through him. He experienced the loneliness of immortality, the weight of an empire that demanded constant strength, the desperate hope she had carried since the prophecy first showed her his face. He felt her fear and her pride and her carefully hidden capacity for love. In return, she experienced humanity, joy and sorrow, the stubborn refusal to accept fate, the ability to love fiercely despite the knowledge that life was brief. She felt human courage and human doubt and human determination. She understood, finally, why her kind had always feared and admired this strange young species. And as their essences merged completely, something awakened. Golden light erupted from, but this time it did not stop with him. It leaped to and transformed, becoming red and gold intertwined. It jumped from them to the nearest bonded pair, then to the next. The cascade effect began. Across the station, humans gasped as dormant power woke inside them. Eyes flickered with golden light. Abilities that had slept for millions of years finally opened. The activation spread faster than anyone had predicted. It jumped through the psychic network, touching every bonded pair in both civilizations. Across human space, billions felt the change ripple through their cells. Parents watching the broadcast suddenly understood what they were capable of. Children playing in colony streets felt strength they had never known. Soldiers preparing for hopeless battle realized they now had weapons beyond any technology. Humanity woke up. The Devourer fleet arrived 2 weeks later. They came expecting easy prey. They found something very different. The battle for existence was unlike anything the cosmos had witnessed. Devourer ships that had once torn through armadas now faced humans whose eyes blazed with golden light, hands that could absorb and redirect essence attacks, minds that could sense the enemy's hunger and use it against them. Warriors fought beside human soldiers. Their combined forces created feedback loops of power that overwhelmed the ancient predators. Red essence and golden light wove together into something neither species could have created alone. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts. And commanded from the flagship at the heart of the Allied fleet, they no longer thought of themselves as human and predator and prey. Their bond had made them something new, something the Devourers had never encountered and could not comprehend. The final confrontation came when the Devourer Alpha arrived on the battlefield. It was a being of pure consuming hunger. It was older than the Empire, older than recorded history. It had devoured more worlds than any species could count, and it turned its attention directly toward the bonded pair who led the resistance. The Alpha's voice thundered across psychic frequencies that every being in the fleet could hear. "You are what we seeded," it proclaimed. You were meant to be our vessels, our continuation. You were designed to carry our legacy until we could return. Stepped forward on the bridge of his ship. Golden light blazed around him like armor made of pure energy. Stood beside him, red power swirling around her in patterns that matched his own. You are right, replied. His voice carried through the shared consciousness of the bonded fleet. You made us to be weapons, to consume everything in our path. He reached for his hand, their essences intertwined. Power beyond anything either species had known alone built between them. But you forgot something about evolution. What? The Alpha demanded. Sometimes the weapon chooses what to protect instead of what to destroy. Together, they unleashed everything, not consuming hunger but transformative light, not destruction but change. The energy struck the Devourer Alpha with the force of two civilizations combined. The Alpha did not die, it transformed. Ancient hunger became ancient wonder. Endless consumption became endless curiosity. The Alpha looked at the galaxy with new eyes. It saw not prey but fellow travelers on an endless journey through existence. The Alpha turned to its fleet and spoke with a voice that carried different meaning than before. Stand down, we are no longer what we were. One by one, the Devourers stopped their attacks. The hunger that had driven them for millions of years faded. In its place came something like peace, something like the satisfaction had felt when she first tasted willingly given blood. The war ended not with annihilation, but with transformation. 1 year later, the galaxy had changed forever. The symbiotic accord had replaced both the United Earth Fleet and the Empire. Humans and lived together on shared worlds. Bonded pairs were common now. Children were born to mixed families. The predator and prey dynamic that had defined their relationship was becoming ancient history. The transformed devourers had retreated to the galaxy's edge. They spent their time contemplating their new existence and occasionally sending emissaries to learn about the civilizations they had once sought to consume. They were no longer a threat. They were strange neighbors learning how to be something other than monsters. Stood on the observation deck of Accord Station, the great hub of the new alliance. Ships from a dozen species passed by the windows. Trade vessels and diplomatic cruisers and explorer craft heading toward unknown stars. Appeared beside him. She moved quietly, but he always knew when she was near. Their bond had only grown stronger in the year since the ceremony. You know, she said, when the prophecy first showed me your face, I assumed you would be my destroyer. And now? She smiled. It was a genuine expression, something she had only learned to do in the past year, something she had learned from him. Now I understand that the prophecy was never about destruction or salvation. It was about choice, about what we would choose to become together. A human child ran past them, chasing a youngling. Their laughter echoed through the station. Behind them, their parents walked hand in hand, one couple among thousands who had forged bonds across species lines. Think the galaxy is ready for whatever comes next? Asked. Leaned against him. The immortal Empress who had found something worth living for. The ancient predator who had learned that sharing was then taking. For the first time in 10,000 years, she said, I am actually looking forward to finding out. Together they watched the stars, not as conqueror and conquered, not as predator and prey, but as partners in whatever strange and wonderful future awaited them all. The prophecy had spoken of ending. It had not mentioned that endings could also be beginnings. And this beginning was only the first chapter of a story that would stretch across the galaxy for to come.